Race, literacy, and power. Three concepts that often intertwine with each other, where if given as a whole, it can empower a person, a group, or a people to inherently post themselves as an inferior or superior collective. These are the most significant actors in categorizing those who are the oppressed or the privileged, with race being the largest determining factor. In a rather exclusive society, people of color are often naturally placed under heat of oppression. One artifact that can more than adequately illustrate this phenomenon is the 2017 film Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. Spoilers ahead on this one.
Look in front of my daughter.
I'm gonna quit.
She'd take care of that for you.
How?
Hypnosis.
I'm good, actually.
You ready for this?
How bad can it be?
So look, I go do my research. Apparently, a whole bunch of brothers been missing in this suburb.
But it's cool.
Bro, how you not scared of this, man?
Good to see another brother around here.
Chris was just telling me how he felt much more comfortable with my being here. Get out.
Sorry, man.
Get out! Yo!
Rose, we gotta go.
Is everything okay?
Rose, the keys. Just get the keys.
I don't know where they are.
Rose?
Sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
Mine is a terrible thing to waste. Terrible thing to waste.
Alright guys, we have a little trailer for you there. Hopefully you're interested in the movie now. So I'm going to pass the mic back over to Joshua and we're going to get into this movie review.
Get Out focuses on the main character, Chris Washington, a black man and photographer played by Daniel Kaluuya, who was dating Allison Williams' white character Rose Armitage. The premise of the movie surrounds Chris's main discomfort in meeting Rose's parents for the first time, who were presented to be unaware of the fact that Chris is black. But Chris and Rose must stay with them for the rest of the weekend as per Rose's request. During their visit, the dynamics between Rose's parents, Missy and Dean, and Chris were seemingly fine, almost dismissing his paranoia of the white couple acting cold towards him for being black.
Call me Dean and you hug me, my man.
So how long has this been going on, this thing?
However, things start to take a turn for the worse when Chris meets the family's two oddly behaving black servants, Georgina and Walter.
We hired Georgina and Walter to help care for my parents. When they died, I couldn't bear to let them go.
From that point on, Chris's visit turns into a nightmare, and the extent of his life is put into peril.
To waste. Terrible thing to waste.
As aforementioned, the film was directed by Jordan Peele, an African-American entertainer, who has been known in Hollywood since 2002. His intention was to create a film that can showcase the everyday experience of the black community in a racist, oppressive, and innately stereotype-focused society. In a previous interview, Peele stated that you can ask a white person to see the world through the eyes of a black person for an hour and a half. So it can be assumed that the white population was his main target audience.
The fear and the horror and the monster in this movie is something that happens between people. It's a collective monster here.
A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
In texts such as Thomas Holt's Knowledge is Power, The Struggle for Black Literacy, Sherman Alexi's Superman and Me, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s Letter from a Birmingham Jail. The oppression takes an educational form in Alexi's and Holt's texts, in which poor education for colored people causes their freedom to be impaired. Holt, an educated African American that grew up during the Civil Rights era, discussed the effects of an inadequate or, quote, passive education on people of color. This idea contributes to the same conversation as Get Out, with each discussing white people oppressing people of color. Alexi, a Native American writer, personally received a poor education on a reservation during his childhood. Alexi's texts described his experience in an environment that had racial expectations, which caused the young Native Americans to concede to the expectation of failing in their pursuits of an education. Expectations influencing the minds of colored people is present in the beginning of the film when Chris expresses his belief that Rose's parents are going to be upset that he's black.
What?
Do they know I'm black?
Should they?
You might wanna,
Mom and Dad, my black boyfriend will be coming up this weekend. I just don't want you to be shocked that he's a black man.
This is understandable, as the environment around him, being the U.S., involves societal expectations that include some white people opposing interracial relationships. The era that Martin Luther King Jr. lived in is closely tied to modern events and minds. which are presented in the movie. During the Civil Rights era of the United States, racist police officers abused their power to terrorize people of color, even when they were innocent and not in any way involved in the protests that were occurring at the time. Even today, people notice that African Americans are targeted by the police solely based on their skin color.
There's a big chunk of our fellow citizenry that feels as if, because of the color of their skin, they are not being treated the same.
Get Out directly references such actions when Chris is targeted by a policeman after the couple called in an accident when they hit a deer. As the officer asks for Chris's license even after learning that Rose was the one that was driving. The officer does not stop bothering Chris until Rose intervenes and demands that the officer leave him alone.
We're just heading up for the weekend.
Can I see your license, please?
He wasn't driving.
I didn't ask who was driving. I asked to see his ID.
Later in the film, we are shown how innocents are affected by racism as it is revealed that Rose is black people to take over based on the person's health and their fitness. These people were taken almost at random, as Chris was actually able to recognize one of the victims named Logan, showing that the people had normal innocent lives before being taken. King also addressed the idea that whites oppressed people of color by advocating for silence and passive stances rather than protests. He made his letter as a response to the Alabama clergyman that claimed that he was wrong in his use of demonstrations and that local black people should remain passive. By attempting to silence the protests, the clergyman endorsed the controls of whites over people of color. This idea is extremely prominent in Get Out, as one of its main plot devices, the sunken place, is a direct reference to the silence that is pushed onto black people. Jordan Peele himself even stated in a tweet that the sunken place means we're marginalized. No matter how hard we scream, the system silences us. Today, we see examples of the pressure of silence discussed by Get Out in events that include protests. The protests in Charlottesville resulted in violence due to the tensions between people that opposed and people that supported having a statue in honor of a Confederate soldier. The current President of the United States has openly opposed protests from the NFL in the form of kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality. All in all, white Americans silence people of color to maintain control over them. Multiple literary works from people with various backgrounds attest to the oppression of white people. Even our experiences with literacy reveal the influence of racism and its effects through the education that we received at a young age. Get Out adds to the conversation of race with displays of police racism, the effects of racism on innocent bystanders, and the struggle to resist the pressure from white people to remain silent on issues that can be protested. Overall, Get Out is an extraordinary film that not only entertains viewers as a horror, but also reflects modern issues regarding race as well.
Being here.
Get out. Sorry, man.
Get out! Yo!
Rose,
Okay, guys, that's Jordan Peele's movie Get Out. I definitely recommend this movie. It was a great way that Jordan Peele tackled some hard topics in a horrifying thriller way. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. Go see it and have an open mind. Now we're gonna do a quick transition here to some of our other group members, Joshua and Patricia. We're gonna go talk about the topics on our literacy narrative and how we came about thinking of these tough subjects of race, power, and literacy, and we're gonna connect it to the movie Get Out. So stay tuned. Okay, so once again, I'm gonna pass the mic back to Joshua, and he's gonna go talk a little, and yeah.
Until my sophomore year in high school, I only viewed movies as sources of entertainment and occasionally information. The only movies that I believed were intended to be educational were documentaries and movies based on historical events. During my second year of high school, my English class watched movies and discussed their meaning. This led to my realization that movies can display the ideas of the time during which they were made. Even movies such as Lethal Weapon reflect on the views, including racial views, that were present when the movie was made through the movie's events. Now, I am able to see the reflection of a time period through the movies by observing the movie's unspoken commentary on the time's views and events. Get Out is the perfect example of current films displaying the views and conflicts that occur today. A part of what makes Get Out such an effective and impactful movie is that the references and symbolism, such as the hypnosis and the sunken place representing white control over black people, can easily be understood by most modern American viewers because racial issues are currently a prominent problem that continues to surround us.
Okay, so there you have it. You heard from Joshua. Now we're going to transition and hear from Patricia's literacy narrative. So give the mic to her.
My experience with watching the film The Boy in Striped Pajamas brought me ache and distraught from realizing the evils of people from craving so much power. Prior to watching the movie, I was not aware of the severity of destruction and inhumanity that the Holocaust was involved with. As the movie progressed, however, the ugliness of humankind slowly made itself known to what used to be an innocent child. I remember witnessing the sheer innocence of the two young main characters, Bruno and Shmuel, and their blindness from the reality of the concentration camps and the war that allowed them to create a friendship that overlooked racial differences. But of course, this happy scenario had to end due to the nature of the movie. Once I realized what the ending of the movie meant for the two boys, I immediately felt the sense of distraught and disgust for the loss of the two boys' lives due to the unwarranted hatred for another race. This was the exact moment I had realized that humankind had an innate sense of selfishness, but that the differences between races should never be a factor for discrimination, oppression, and destruction. A people should not be outcasted for their origins, but the actions of a person is what should determine what is rightfully theirs.
And there you have it. That was Patricia's literacy narrative. Now I'm going to go in and talk a little more in depth about myself and my experience. Okay, so my literacy narrative is a bit different than Joshua and Patricia's. Although racism and inequality were prevalent ideas in elementary, I didn't really fully grasp the actual prejudice and the pure evil hate that was actually there. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, that was just always just another holiday for me. I thought of it as a 3-day weekend, and not once did I really think about the fact that what everyone experienced at that time and what the day actually meant. Fast forward to 6th grade, it wasn't until my English class under my teacher, Mr. Dosher, where I read the book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This book was a great book, but specifically in the book, when Lee portrayed the racial prejudice shown to the black prisoner that Atticus was trying to defend, it drew some emotions in me of anger and of sadness as well. If it wasn't for analyzing the sentences sentence by sentence, I would have never really fully grasped what Lee was trying to portray in that book. But after going through that book and reading To Kill a Mockingbird, I really not only bettered my literacy skills, but I also became more knowledgeable with racism and its oppressive nature, which really struck me and caused me to think more about actions I do and the people around me. Alright, with that being said, that concludes the movie review, and yeah.